Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, helping you prepare for the PMP exam. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Prepcast, where we help you develop the knowledge you need to pass the PMP exam. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. In this lesson, we are going to take a look at how to develop a project charter in the Develop Project Charter process. Let's start out with the good news here. There's only one output in this process, and that, of course, is the project charter. So in this lesson, we will look at, obviously, at the project charter. We'll also see the business case and the statement of work. We will learn when and why a project manager is assigned to the project. We'll look at reasons to undertake projects, and we'll discuss expert judgment. Let's begin with the definition of the Project Integration Management knowledge area. So, Project Integration Management includes the processes and activities to identify, define, combine, unify and coordinate the various processes and project management activities within the project management process groups. So let's move on to the processes. The first of 6 processes in this knowledge area is our focus in this lesson here. The process is Develop Project Charter, and the intent is to get the project going, because this is the process of developing a document that formally authorizes the existence of a project and provides the project manager with the authority to apply organizational resources to project activities. Once we have that out of the way, we begin planning. We begin with the Develop Project Management Plan process. That's the process of defining, preparing, and coordinating all subsidiary plans and integrating them into a comprehensive project management plan. Now that everything is planned, we can start doing the work. The process is called Direct and Manage Project Work. That's the process of leading and performing the work defined in the project management plan and implementing approved changes to achieve the project's objective. And as we are actually doing the work in this third process, we have the 4th and 5th process that help us monitor and control everything, beginning with Monitor and Control Project Work, the process of tracking, reviewing and reporting the progress to meet the performance objectives defined in the project management plan. And then we also have Perform Integrated Change Control. That's the process of reviewing all change requests, approving changes, and managing changes to deliverables, organizational process assets, project documents, and the project management plan, and also communicating their disposition. And at some point, we come to the end of our project and we want to close project or phase. That's the process of finalizing all activities across all of the project management process groups to formally complete a project or phase. As a reminder, Project Integration Management is the only knowledge area that has a process in every single one of our 5 process groups. The process we're looking at right now, Develop Project Charter, is in the initiating process group. And well, yes, think about it. The charter defines the project. Therefore, you are initiating the process. No wonder this is in the initiating process group. The main concept that you have to understand in the Develop Project Charter process is that the project charter should be issued by the project initiator or sponsor. This could be an individual, like a department head, a department like a PMO, or an organization as a whole. What often happens is that the official initiator or sponsor lacks the experience of writing a good charter, so they ask the PM for help. That's okay, but even though you and I may be writing the charter, it is issued and signed by the initiator or sponsor. The Charter itself formally acknowledges the existence of a project and authorizes the project manager, who is named in the Charter, to begin planning and executing the project. The project charter should be broadly based with just sufficient detail to initiate the project. And why is that? Well, identifying extra detail this early in the project wastes time prior to initiation. And as you don't know a great detail at this stage, then this is a pointless exercise to go and delve very, very deep. If a project charter also is broad, you won't need to change it too often during the project. The real detail will be progressively elaborated in scope management. There is a simple guideline we can follow when it comes to who signs a project charter. As we have learned just now, the charter is issued by the project initiator or sponsor. This entity could be a person, department, a whole company, should be someone outside to the project organization who is at an appropriate level to fund the project. This entity should also be able to commit resources to our project. After all, we want to get some actual work done, and for that we need resources, we need people. For instance, this initiator, this signatory could be a program office, a government agency, a customer, a PMO. And let me give you an example why it's important that this person has to be outside of the project executing organization. If you're working for a consulting company, your customers will come to you. They will tell you what projects they want, and they will authorize the projects that you will be doing for them. You can't turn this around. You can't go to your customer and tell them, hey, we thought up a great project and we have initiated it and you now have to pay it. Well, that's really not going to fly. Therefore, someone outside of your company, of your project executing company, has to initiate and fund the project. And when it comes to assigning the project manager, we also follow specific guidelines. The project manager has to be assigned as early as feasible. It is best to assign a project manager while the charter is defined, so that she or he can take part in the project early on. If that is not possible, then the project manager must be assigned prior to the start of the planning phase. And let me repeat that. The project manager must be assigned prior to the start of the planning phase. Let us now take a look at why we even undertake projects. There can be a number of reasons for that, and here are a few, beginning with a market demand. For example, energy-saving light bulbs. There could be a business need. At the bank where I used to work, the business continually added new projects to their offerings, so they demanded that our software supports their business ideas. It could be a customer request, and we all have had customers, so we know that their requests, they can be manifold. Then it could be a technological advance. For example, tablet computers are a technological advance, and your company now needs to develop and sell its own tablet computers. It could be a legal requirement. There are new healthcare legislations that went into effect, and you now have to support this. Or it could be a social need. For example, building a new school in a third world country. These examples that you just saw are the challenges that are presented to you and your company. But should you really undertake a project for a technological advance? Does it really make sense for our company to go embarking on such an endeavor and start developing these tablet computers? Should we really start that project? When you ask these kind of questions, that's then the moment when someone has to make a decision if you want or do not want act on these opportunities. And I want to go ahead and have you guess who makes this decision. So, is it the project manager who decides whether or not we're going to start a project, or is it management who decides if we are going to act on a possible opportunity and start a project? What do you think? Okay, what's your answer? If you said the project manager, then you're wrong, because for once, it's not the project manager who makes this decision. This is a management function that is usually supported by a selection process with all kinds of criteria. It's not the project manager who gives his or her okay to new projects. It's management who decides. Once the decision is made, you will be chartering the project, but you don't decide on the project. Actually, in some companies, that doesn't happen right away. In some companies, you will first execute maybe a feasibility study or some sort of similar analysis, and then you charter the project. No two charters will look alike, but there are a number of standard items on them. Let's take a look at a few. To me personally, the most important one is the business need. After all, we do our projects to support a company's business, so this one here is at the top of my personal list. The business need is closely followed by the requirements. This early on in the project, the requirements can of course only be at a high level. Description of what will satisfy the needs of customers, sponsors, and other stakeholders. Then there is the assigned project manager and what his or her authority is. That's important to remember because, as we have heard, the project manager should be assigned during this process. And let's not forget that we will also have a summary milestone schedule in there and also a summary budget. As you can see from these 5 items, you are going to have to be pretty high level at this point. Not surprising. The charter is one of your first documents and not much detail is known yet. You should also not forget that the developed charter process is repeated in every phase of the project. That way you can revisit the charter and make sure that your decisions are still valid, and it can also serve as a stage gate to approve the next project phase. Here is the overview of the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs from the PMBOK guide. As you can see, we take a sizable number of inputs and work our way through them to produce the project charter as our single output. We begin with a quick overview of the inputs. We have the project statement of work, we have the business case, we will look at agreements, and of course we also have enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. And before we get going, a little warning here, we have a separate lessons for many of the inputs, tools, techniques and outputs that you will see in this lesson. So in the coming slides, we'll do a quick overview for each of them. And by the end of this lesson, I promise you, you're going to be sick of me saying, and for this item, we have a separate lesson where we'll go more into detail, and you should definitely watch that separate lesson. So take in the high-level overview right now, but definitely do study the details in all of those separate lessons that we have. The project statement of work, also known as the SOW, should discuss 3 important areas, beginning with the business need. Like I said before, this is a very important part of the whole project. Why are we doing this? Is it a market demand? Are we required to do this by the government or by a new technology? It's important to understand the business needs so that you as the project manager can respond correctly to what the business wants. We also want to have a product scope description in here. At this point of the game, this description will of course be at a high level since not too much detail is known yet, but it should at least have enough detail so that you can begin planning the project based on this scope here. And then we also have the strategic plan. Have you ever thought why we do projects in an organization? Well, organizations are usually great at doing things again and again. For example, one company produces 10 million bottles of soda. Another produces cars, and a third produces millions upon millions of sheets of paper for our printers. Well, that's what we call operations. The company's management, however, is always looking into the future and has strategic plans where they want to go. And the way they turn their strategic plans, their strategies, into operations is via a project. It is therefore the project and us project managers that make the strategic plan happen. That is why the statement of work should contain the strategic objectives that this project answers to. And of course, management should only have selected the project in the first place if they were certain that it supports their strategy. Well, at least we hope so, right? So, the project statement of work is usually a description of the work that needs to be done. This description should be written by the customer in their own words, and it doesn't matter if the customer is internal or external. It's also normal that external customers include the statement of work as part of their request for proposal. Next, we have the business case, and the purpose of a business case is to capture the reasoning for initiating a project or task. It is generally designed to answer the question, what are the likely financial and other business consequences if we take this or that action or this or that decision? Having a business case assures that whenever resources such as money or effort are consumed, they should be in support of the business need. And business case development is a step companies use for project selection. As I mentioned earlier, we have a separate lesson where we look at the charter, the business case, and the SOW in detail. So that's why we have only a quick high-level overview of these here for you. The term agreement is defined as the act of agreeing or coming to a mutual arrangement, an arrangement that is accepted by all parties to a transaction or a contract or document delineating such an arrangement. As you can imagine, agreements can come in many forms: a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, a service level agreement, an SLA, a letter of agreement or a letter of intent. They can be verbal, or I sometimes even do them via email. The possibilities are endless regarding how you and your customers agree, arrange and document what this product, this project will be all about. However, it is the norm throughout the world that when you work on a project for an external customer, that a contract is issued and signed. In this way, you have a clear legal document on which your project can be based. We also have the enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets as inputs to this process. These two terms are what we call PMI-isms. They'll return again and again throughout your studies for the exam, and you'll get to know them much better as you come across them again and again. So, the enterprise environmental factors, they must be considered when you're developing the project charter. For instance, if the project is using new technology, but none of your employees have the experience, then you may want to include hiring or contracting of appropriate resources into the charter. Or there may be a particular regulation that this project falls under that you need to consider. The organizational process assets, these refer to your company's policies, procedures, plans, guidelines, etc. that may affect the project. You need to take these into account at this time because you want to make sure that you follow all of them during your project. I mean, it would not be smart to ignore these guidelines at this time only to find out later that you were supposed to rent your machinery from a specific vendor which just changed your budget needs. Well, as I've said before, and you may already have seen, that we have a separate in-depth lesson for each of these enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets, which is why this is about as much time as we are devoting to them right here. We are moving on to the tools and techniques, and as you may remember from our overview, there are two. We have the expert judgment and facilitation techniques. Let's get going here. The tool and technique of expert judgment is exactly what you might think it is, finding out from the experts about what should go into the project charter. And you can, of course, apply this expert judgment to any technical or managerial detail on the project. This expert judgment can come from people in your organization, from consultants, industry groups, etc. And what kind of things would these experts help you with at this point in your project? Well, we do have a separate lesson on expert judgment where we look at this in detail. But in general, let's take a look at what these people can help you here with. They can help you with technical expertise, which is related to the product and how it should be created. They can help you with project management expertise, for instance, from another project manager who has managed a similar project in the past and has recommendations for you, or from your PMO even. They can help you with financial expertise from your finance department in regards to availability of funds during the next year for your project. There could be subject matter experts that you bring on. This could be your customer or your company employees, and they help you in regards to the scope of the project. Or there could be industry experts. These are members of your professional organization who help you in regards to how they have managed similar projects, or if they are aware of any regulations that you might need to have to consider. We're moving on to the facilitation techniques, and a facilitator is defined as someone who helps a group of people understand their common objectives and assists them to plan to achieve them without taking a particular position in the discussion. While it's possible that someone who is project internal acts as facilitator, it's usually best to bring on someone who is external and neutral. Some of the techniques that a facilitator will apply are activities like meeting management, brainstorming, conflict resolution, and problem solving. In the process of developing the project charter, a good facilitator will help bring the diverging ideas from stakeholders together so that the varying viewpoints are included in the final output. And that final output is, of course, what? Yes, it is, of course, the project charter. We already talked about the project charter earlier in this lesson, so there's no need to look at it again now, which means we are done with the outputs, especially if I may remind you again that we do have a separate lesson that focuses on the charter's details. And I promise this is the last time in this lesson that I'm going to refer to other lessons where you can see more details. Let's review. The project charter should be issued by the project initiator or sponsor. Often the charter is created by the two organizations involved in the project, those who request the project and those who execute the project. The charter, however, is signed by someone who is external to the project, and at the same time this person has both the authority to sign and fund the project. The project manager is named and appointed in the project charter, and the project charter should be broadly based with just sufficient detail to initiate the project. And why is that? Extra detail this early on in the project wastes time prior to initiation, and as you don't know a great deal at this stage, it's just a waste of time. If the project charter is broad, you also won't need to change it too often during the project. Before we go, I have a few questions for you with which I'm hoping to encourage you to really get going with your studies. So, how is your studying coming along for the PMP exam? Do you have a study plan yet? Have you signed up for the exam yet? If you have said no to these questions, then I urge you to act quickly. It's very important that you have a plan and a target date for your exam. You will be so much more focused. But of course, if you answered yes, then good for you and Please do keep it up. If you're looking for some guidance, then may I suggest Module 00.3 of the Prepcast here. This module not only contains several overview lessons about various aspects of the PMP exam, it also contains a few lessons with ideas, tips and tricks to frame and plan your studies. And with that, we have come to the end of this lesson. So, Justine, what do you say?
Study harder and you will go further.
And I say, until next time.